So in this video, I have an update for you on a major win against a statewide magazine ban. Oregon Measure 114's firearms purchase permit and their magazine ban has been found unconstitutional and struck down with a permanent injunction. But now Oregon has appealed that decision and is asking for that decision to be done away with. So let's talk about what is happening. But real quick before we jump into this video, if you think that magazine bans are clearly a violation of the Second Amendment, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. Also, I want to thank the sponsor of this video, which is Kershaw Knives. Kershaw makes some of the best knives available on the market if you're looking for a quality EDC knife. I carry a Kershaw Iridium knife every single day for my EDC, and I can't recommend their knives enough. And right now, if you go to the website and order using the code 2024 Scholar40, you can actually get 40% off the MSRP of any of your orders and free shipping on orders over $50. So head on over to Kershaw Knives, pick yourself up a quality EDC knife, and thank you again to Kershaw Knives for sponsoring and supporting this two-way content. As I mentioned in the intro, in this video, we're going to be discussing and breaking down a huge win against a state magazine ban and then also a permit to purchase scheme that was put in place. Oregon Measure 114 put in place a statewide permit to purchase scheme and a magazine ban that was recently ruled unconstitutional and struck down in its entirety. The state court judge in this case issued a permanent injunction against Measure 114, which was a significant win. This measure, which passed in the state of Oregon, creates that purchase scheme, that permit scheme, and then also a magazine ban, essentially a restriction on the future acquisition or purchase and possession of any magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. The case we're going to be breaking down and talking about is Arnold v. Kotek. The Arnold case is a state lawsuit which was filed in conjunction with Gun Owners of America, or GOA, and it challenges Oregon Measure 114 in its entirety. But it's using the Oregon state constitution and it's going through the state courts to challenge this law. Despite the recent decision in the permanent injunction that was issued by the state court judge, the state of Oregon has now filed an appeal and is asking for the Oregon Court of Appeals to grant a stay halting that permanent injunction. Last time we talked about this case, I informed you that the lower court judge there, the state court judge, declined all the state of Oregon's objections to the order, and he issued a final order in the case. The order of the court finalized a permanent injunction against the magazine and permit scheme and the permit requirement, and now it essentially closed the lower court review of the case. But now what has happened is Oregon has gone crying up to the next level. They've gone to the Oregon State Court of Appeals, and they're asking for the Oregon State Court of Appeals to issue a stay on that permanent injunction and ultimately review this case and overrule that decision on appeal. So we need to break down some of the history of this case and what is going to be relevant now on appeal. Now, for those not familiar with Oregon Measure 114, let me explain generally what it did. Oregon Measure 114 first requires that anyone purchasing a firearm must obtain a permit to purchase. To obtain that permit to purchase, the resident will need to complete a safety training course, go through a background check, get fingerprinted, show a valid ID, and then after all that, pay a fee, and maybe you can get your permit. However, Oregon Measure 114 did not stop with just creating this permit. The second significant thing that the measure did is it created a ban on the sale, purchase, transfer, and possession of any so-called large capacity magazine. Effectively, just any magazine that holds more than 10 rounds. Now, in response to Oregon Measure 114, multiple cases were filed, and ultimately the aim was to halt the enforcement of this law. There was the GOA state lawsuit, which is this case, Arnold v. Kotek. And then you also have a bunch of other federal cases like the OFF v. Kotek case, which is a federal lawsuit, and it's using the Second Amendment at large to challenge this measure. Prior in this Arnold case, the judge there extended a temporary restraining order, or a TRO, which barred the permit scheme from going into effect. And he also originally granted a preliminary injunction, which barred the magazine ban also from going into effect. This was a significant and temporary win in this case, which prevented the Measure 114 from fully going into effect in the state of Oregon. But again, that was just a temporary form of relief, and it just was a temporary stopgap so that the case could make its way to a full court merits review in the lower court. Now, the lower court judge there, Judge Robert Rocchio, did review the case, did a full merits review, and ruled that Oregon Measure 114 in its entirety is unconstitutional, and he issued a permanent injunction against it. On top of that, he also rejected the state of Oregon's 7 arguments for why he should reverse that permanent injunction, because after he issued his proposed ruling, Oregon was given an opportunity to object to that order. Judge Rocchio stated in his order that the Harney County Circuit Court is issuing a permanent injunction under Oregon Revised Statute 28.020, declaring ballot measure 114 unconstitutional, thereby permanently enjoining its implementation. The order goes on to state that the court is preventing the undue burden of ballot measure 114 from being imposed on current and prospective gun owners who have a right to lawfully possess firearms for the purpose of defending themselves and the state against imminent threats of harm. The court, using its equitable powers, declares and adjudges ballot measure 114 facially unconstitutional in all of its applications under Oregon Constitution Article 1, Section 27. Ballot measure 114 is permanently enjoined from implementation. So in that order, Judge Rashio ruled that Oregon Measure 114 is invalid in its entirety, it's invalid under the state's constitution, and therefore he struck it down entirely. Now in the order, he did also give the state of Oregon until December 8th of 2023 to file objections to his order. If they did not decide to file those objections, well, then the order would go into full effect. Well, of course, the state of Oregon was not going to end the fight, so they did file objections to that permanent injunction. And the objections that they put forward are these here on the screen. And then last month in January, there was a hearing on those objections to see whether or not Judge Rashio would accept any of those objections and modify his decision at all. But ultimately, what he decided to do after a hearing is he systematically rejected all the state of Oregon's objections, and then he also denied the request of the state for a delay on his final judgment, because what the state of Oregon wanted is for him to delay the implementation of his decision so that they could appeal up to the next level. But he both denied all the objections and then also denied the stay on his final judgment. Instead, what he did is on January 9th, he issued his final judgment in the case and closed out the case at the lower court level. Now, there's still some proceedings going on kind of at the lower court level about attorney's fees, which is a positive sign as well, but generally the lower court determination is now closed. But of course, like we all said, the state of Oregon was not going to let this sit. So they filed an appeal up to the Oregon Court of Appeals, and that's where this case currently is. Oregon is currently asking for the appeals court to stay that lower court decision while the appeal is taking place. So they have filed a motion for a stay of that permanent injunction. The case is currently in front of judges Ortega, Egan, and Kamens, and I believe there was also another judge who was originally assigned to the appeals court review, which was Judge Joyce, who was assigned, like I mentioned originally, but has recently recused herself from the case because there was some sort of conflict, I believe. Now, I'm not super familiar with all the judges, especially their state court judges on appeals court. I don't practice in Oregon, so I don't know who they are, but there were a bunch of motions to disqualify the judges from the pro-2A side. And so that kind of means going forward that these judges were not, ideal for the pro-2A side. The motion to disqualify for a couple of these judges were denied. And also, it doesn't seem like any of these judges are going to recuse themselves. So, that's also something to look towards going forward, that maybe these judges are not ideal for the arguments or the pro-2A side. So the state of Oregon is currently appealing the lower court decision and is actively trying to get a stay on the lower court's permanent injunction. For those of you in Oregon, this is going to be a critical battle to watch going forward. You're going to want to be watching to see what happens with this stay, because right now a stay issued against that permanent injunction would potentially allow Oregon to still put in force and effect Oregon Measure 114. So you're going to be wanting to watch that. And then also there's going to be just a general review at the appeals court level on whether or not the lower court got it correct or not. Now, ultimately, I think this case is going to make its way back up at some point to the Oregon State Supreme Court, and then eventually probably up to the U.S. Supreme Court as well. I think some magazine ban cases and some rifle ban cases are eventually going to make their way up to the Supreme Court. Right now, there's a bunch of cases out of Illinois. They're seeking review of rifle ban cases and magazine ban cases. So we're going to be watching those as well, because that will impact states like Oregon, states like California, and other states as well. So of course, if anything else changes, I will let you guys know. Also, if you like this video and you would like to support the channel, one of the best ways to do that is to like, comment, and subscribe. All those things help to fuel the algorithm, and it signals to YouTube that you guys see value in these videos and in this type of 2A news. But as always, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and don't forget this nation was built by armed scholars, and this nation will be maintained by armed scholars.